Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to talk on one of the another interesting topic. Our topic of discussion is globalization and its dimensions. And for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Amna Mirza. Dr. Amna Mirza is Assistant Professor in Department of Political Science, SPM College, University of Delhi. Dr. Amna Mirza is a prolific professor. Friends, we would like to share with you all that she has authored 5 books and she has been awarded several times. Friends, if you feel so that you need to ask questions from Dr. Amna Mirza on today's topic, then do call us through our toll-free number. Our toll-free number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. All dear friends are requested to call in the last 10 minutes of the lecture only, as well as you are requested to ask questions relevant to the topic only. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Amna Mirza, once again. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the lecture.
Thank you very much. Hello to all the listeners. Today here we will be discussing a very significant topic, globalization and its dimensions. Now, with the advent of the concept of globalization, like any debate, like any topic in the realm of political science, the debates over this narrative of globalization have become a common phenomena, yet there is no clear-cut definition of what globalization actually means. The term globalization, the debate goes on, but we have to see that with time, globalization has indeed been debated. Now, what are these debates in globalization about? The continuous growing global connections have had a substantial impact on our day-to-day lives in one way or the other, which indeed makes globalization a point of analysis. Today, our systems have become multidimensional, complex systems. You have to understand that indeed globalization may be seen as a modern phenomenon. It is being recently talked about. However, the roots of globalization have existed in the past also. It is always about the ideas of interchange and exchange that were even prominent in the Middle Ages. When we look at how trading system by European communities, European companies at the time of colonialism, or to even talk about the Great Silk Route, these are prominent evidences of existence of interchange of ideas, people, goods, services, or to say prominent evidences of existence of globalization. However, today when we look at in the present day phenomena, the widely discussed ideas of interconnectedness, interchange, exchange that have indeed made globalization much more complicated as well as a unique phenomena. Now, to really understand the nature, the process, the idea of globalization, clear as well as subtle, several efforts have been made by theorists, by thinkers, by academia, by media to elaborate on this concept. Today, we also attempt to depict that what are the various ways by which globalization has indeed had a great impact on the contemporary world and our lives also. Let's understand that 20th century witnessed great changes in the history of mankind. We saw the great 2 wars, the First World War, the Second World War, the Great Depression, followed by Cold War. These were certain examples in history where we saw that the world became much more interlinked in terms of technological advances. We witnessed travel, communications, information technology which developed, and then they were used by the countries to maintain balance in the society. Now, the most prominent of such interconnections which can be seen, that is, at the end of the Cold War, the collapse of Soviet Union, the world had a different trajectory, wherein at this time the world was undoubtedly interlinked, which could build the idea of a sustainable society. Let's understand how this impact of globalization is just not limited to interconnections, because this idea of globalization has led to changes being brought up and continuously being innovated, which definitely has little or less control for social, economic, political, technological dimensions, which are of course beyond borders. Growth in the sector of trade, commerce, technology, communications have had an impact on everyday events, including local events, which now have global recognition and therefore needs to be studied as an effect of globalization. The boundaries, yes, which were earlier limited to a country, today it is being said that boundaries don't exist anymore, or to say that we live in a borderless world. The world has become akin to a one marketplace. And whenever we look at these debates on globalization, we see that how economic linkages have indeed presented the broader idea of a world where activities in one part of the world impact activities in other part of the world, where the local has a connection with the global, and vice versa, what is global impacts what is local. Let's understand. And to quote here Professor George Rister, who also says that there is a tendency amongst us to reduce globalization to economic realm and activities, but there is much more to globalization than just economics. The dimension and scope of globalization can be summarized under several heads, and to name some of these dimensions which we would be looking at today: economic, political, cultural, technological, and most important, ecological. These can be now narrated. Economics. Economics is something that concerns markets, that concerns exchange and trade. So when we look at the economic dimension, globalization today in its present form, in form of international market integration, trade, rise of multi-dimensional, multinational corporations, production system of distribution completely complex. This shows that how the process of integration and exchange has brought different kinds of impact in our everyday life. Effects of these have led to markets impinging on our everyday life. Markets indeed are two-dimensional. At one layer, market increases competition amidst the buyers and the sellers. There is less warfare. Today we don't talk about wars in military sense. Today, let's look at everyday example. We are talking about trade warfare. Today conflicts are no more military but about economics. Today markets really bring focus the debate on distribution of wealth. Now, alongside this idea of integration and exchange, at the economic dimension of globalization, there is a debate that at one side we definitely have rise of foreign direct investment, new forms of foreign institutional investment, but at the other side there is rise of economies of scale. Interdependence of nations of course have linked the markets, but has led to instability wherein variations of economic cycle, lack of responsibility and accountability of foreign players have indeed led to new risk on the national sovereignty, on the debate of legitimacy. Now, governments of nation states have always played an important role in the domestic economic policies. But today, because of rise of this supranational governance, there is certain kind of new forces on the domestic economy that makes things tough for domestic players. Let's look at, there are new dimensions of preferential biddings, contract awards, export credit, development aid, trade, investment agreements, and all these have indeed played a crucial role, but they have also told us that the state is not the only player in the international market. The states have to coexist with organizations such as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, specialized UN agencies. No doubt they provide economic and financial structures, right kind of information for globalization to move. International groupings such as Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, or to talk about the World Economic Forum. There are new kinds of mediums to regulate global governance and debate on global trade and finance. But at the other side, in the economic dimension, if we are having trade and interchange, we are also having certain kinds of instability, certain kinds of debate that whether the outcome of trade and exchange are equal for all or no. Now, flowing from the economic dimension is the political dimension. Now, international relations have often been defined by boundaries. Wars have been fought over boundaries. Today, the political system, the idea of state, which was limited only to boundaries of a particular nation, have enlarged. And this has had an impact beyond just the territories. Now, because of this rapid rise of communication, this idea of interconnections, the world is becoming one unified, integrated system. The most essential characteristics of this interconnected world is we see that today the world is always awake, or to what we say, the city never sleeps. The world never sleeps because we are continuously connected. And alongside that, with this interconnection, there is check on the power. Today, power is plural. Today, with this power being plural, sovereignty is becoming porous. Now, with this ushering by new forces, conditions of functioning of the state are also impacted. This is why we see that there are new demands, new constraints, juxtaposed with the fact that states exist with limited resources. The sovereign power of the state are being challenged. They are being questioned by supranational governance and regulations. What is being witnessed is that there is crisis of the nation state because there is plural authority structure alongside issues of legitimacy of these new international actors. Do the new international actors who are definitely not elected by the popular mandate, can they have say in decision making which impacts life of everyday people? This is why the idea of globalization of political is always problematic, because there is deterritorialization of decision making. Decision is no longer confined to a discrete world, but decision making has become enmeshed in the system. But the debate here is that do the decisions that we have from this enmeshed, complex, interconnected system, are these decisions democratic? Have they been taken by the larger consensus of popular mandate? And lastly, what is the process of ratification of these decisions into the domestic apparatus? Is this process of ratification again on a thick or on a thin idea of democracy and participation? Now, no phenomena exists just within the political and the economic. Within this is the very larger setup, that is cultural. Now, multiplicity in the cultural has become a prominent phenomena that has been accompanied by this present day globalization. Let's look at the fact that today we are under the influence of global markets, multinational corporations that have turned various societies to adapt the culture of world on an altogether cosmopolitan level. Look around, dear listeners. You have McDonald's, you have Nike, you have Reebok. Of course, with the plethora of new brands, consumers have a choice, but at the same time, we are being driven into consumerism, wherein there is quest for more and more demand, and consumer in the process of having too many brands somewhere is led more confused. Now, adding to that, products are always the end result of continuous efforts. The end product that we have in our hand is by a cumulative effort of workers, of management, of so many other processes. What about exploitation of workers? Because the end motive for any global corporation, any multinational corporation is extraction of profit. Now, this profit has become a part of our day-to-day practice. At one point of time, if we are witnessing the rise of idea of global culture, the rise of English as an accepted language of communication, or the idea of cosmopolitanism, the acceptance of liberal democratic norms, to that there is another debate, that is homogenization, Americanization, or that is it a new form of colonialism where we are being tutored, we are being trained to accept what actually is coming from the West. Nonetheless, there is this debate of East versus West, that why is it that societies of the East, the third world, the societies of South should accept what comes from the West as the norms. So, in the cultural dimension, of course, within this idea of shrinking of world, shrinking of borders, compression of space and time, we are being moved to accept and adapt to new forms of norms, new forms of ideas, but within this, are we being really subsumed in this process? Therein lies the debate. Technological advancements have worked towards transmission of ideas which have influence over our social values too, and this in turn has led to the idea of standardization of society, the idea of prevalence of uniformity, and there are concerns that does diversity then take a back seat when we given too much to uniformity. Further, globalization has been perceived as complex connectivity that has led to development of dense networks. The rise in proximity has led to distant places, far spaces, yet far functionally get close together, and the metaphor of global neighbors has been accepted. Now, internet, communications, technology and global media have played an essential part in diffusion and transformation of ideas, which indeed has led to new debates on diversity, and that is the world really ready for a multicultural phenomena. Now, Again, when we look at internet, there is this rural-urban divide. Of course, when we say that we are living in a global world and internet is the guiding anchor for it, is this internet readily, equally available to the north as well as to the south, to the rural as well as to the urban? There are debates, and the beauty of process of globalization is that alongside these churnings, alongside these debates, the process is going on. Let's look at technology, smartphones, Google, new kinds of apps. All these technological advancements, be it from the realm of transport, communication, machinery, appliances, media, they have indeed made the world run at a very fast pace. They have expedited the trade at international level. Now, these innovations are indeed having two sides. At one side, they are leading to new kinds of changes. They are making us observe new phenomena of improvements and are pushing forces where market forces consider it profitable. Technology is often described as socialized knowledge of producing goods and services. Now, the economic forces, the processes that accompany the international technological revolution are both, we have to say, informational as well as global, because under new historical conditions, productivity is generated through competition, through new kinds of innovations where global network of interactions play a significant role. Again, in the realm of technology, let's look at nanotechnology, plastic money, optic fibers. They have indeed led to new horizons on trade and exchange, instant access to goods and services, which has been facilitated by technology, have led to what we can call as distributed intelligence. The democratic practices, forces, have indeed become complex due to such new developments. The future of globalization is then what we can say unpredictable, as the world is changing day by day. Now, within this technology, again, there is this dimension of accessibility. We may talk about robotics, nanotechnology, which are being used in health, various other kinds of everyday lifestyle events, or to talk about artificial intelligence. But let's ask, who all have access and affordability for this technology? Do technological dimensions come at a cost? That at one point, if we are having rampant technology, at the other point, we may just have people who are bereft of access to this technology. Let's come to another significant aspect, that is, do you think globalization impacts our ecology? Of course, when a process has deep roots in economics, in political, in social, in cultural and in technology, ecology then is definitely not left far behind. Globalization has led to resource shortage. There is rise in population, there is reduction and harmful effects on our biodiversity, because what Mahatma Gandhi ji also said, there is enough in the world for our need but not for our greed. And because of globalization, because of this instant competition, constant quest for new markets, there is an impact on our environment where we want to withdraw more and more from our surroundings. There is increase in pollution on land, air, water, noise, and not to forget to mention here global warming and climate change. Today, environment has witnessed exploitative nature of globalization, which increases the consumption of products, but alongside there are extractive tendencies, and to blame here it's the process of capitalism which has accompanied globalization. The extensive depletion of forest area, decay in fisheries, or to talk about the constant escalation in earth temperature, the vagaries of climate. These are the negative consequences which makes the notion of sustainable development. Yes, this idea of sustainable development has been put forward at the Rio Earth Summit, and this idea of sustainable development is one of the reformist ideas of how to make this process of globalization work. Now, to say that concept of globalization is definitely something not clear would be wrong, because the concept of globalization, it is not a settled formula. It is being constantly, continuously contested, debated, rethought by numerous schools of thoughts also. Just that we saw that how there are various dimensions of globalization, similarly there are various schools of thoughts also on globalization. So friends, we'll be talking about these various schools of thoughts of globalization just in some time from now.
With this note, thank you, and thank you so much for giving us this productive session on globalization and its dimensions. Dear friends, there is a lot more for you in store. You are just requested to be with us, as we are going to be back in a shorter while after the break and would be discussing more. Thank you for watching us. friends, welcome back to this session. Friends, as you know that today we are talking on globalization and its dimensions, and for the discussion on the topic we have with us in our studios Dr. Amna Mirza. Dr. Amna Mirza is Assistant Professor in Department of Political Science, SPM College, University of Delhi. Dr. Amna Mirza is a prolific and an energetic professor, and through her we are getting in-depth knowledge on today's topic. Dear friends, you are requested to call us through a toll-free number. Our toll-free number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. Dear friends, you are requested to call in the last 10 minutes, as well as I kindly request you to ask questions relevant to the topic only. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Amna Mirza, once again. Hello, ma'am. Welcome back to the session.
Hello, listeners. Once again, welcome back. So, let's begin once again. Concept of globalization definitely is not having a settled formula. It is being constantly contested by numerous schools of thought. Now, what is a school of thought? A school of thought has a particular perspective for us to understand a concept. So, here we go. Some of the schools like hyperglobalists, the skeptics and the transformationalist. Now, these are three prominent schools of thought that we will be understanding to further our discussion on globalization. Now, the hyperglobalist, they say globalization is a new emerging point in the history of mankind. The skeptics, the second one, they define the process of intense internationalization and counter the overstressing of benefits of economic integration. The transformationalist school, on the other hand, holds that globalization makes the government look beyond the domestic boundaries. Therefore, it is rightly opined that globalization is like a juggernaut because it crushes in all in its parts. There are so many variants to it that one definite perspective cannot hold valid. Now, let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of globalization. You've just heard the political, social, cultural, technological, ecological dimension of globalization. Let's understand what are the advantages globalization brings to us along with it. Of course, it opens up new opportunities. It presents to us new choices. It promotes economic efficiency because there is constant competition. Competition leads to survival of the fittest, and the best one definitely is seen as the most efficient one. It generates growth. It yields profit because there are new opportunities of work. Nevertheless, there are certain negative aspects also in this process of globalization. That is, let's look at the gap between the rich and the poor, the idea of north versus south, developed versus underdeveloped. All these issues, they have been on the rise, and sadly, solutions to deal with it are indeed very much tough. Or the issue of inequality, injustice in resource distribution, insecurity of jobs because the markets are always unstable, poverty, malnutrition. At one side, there is great amount of affluence, whereas at the other side, people are still denied basic human rights. Increase in rampant cases of non-traditional security dimensions like narcotics, terrorism, pandemics, because all these are somewhere connected to the way this idea of interconnected world has led to events being linked up together. So, when we look at that there are advantages in globalization, we cannot overlook the fact that the list of disadvantages have also increased. It should also be noticed that at one side, the globalization is advancing integration of economy, bringing people closer with internet, communication technology, whereas on the other hand, it has also led to reduced opportunities for those who do not have any access to this new system. So globalization has to be seen as a contested concept with positives as well as negative. Now globalization seems to have somewhere based itself upon the premise of neoliberalism. Now liberalism has always stood for liberty of the individual. When we look at neoliberalism in the realm of global politics, it has always called for laissez-faire state, where intervention of the state is reduced, free market is encouraged. Let me quote here a very significant economist, Milton Friedman, who describes globalization as farther, faster, cheaper and deeper. However, within this there is a wide criticism to the philosophy of neoliberalism on the argument that is they try to legitimize structural impediments that are being imposed by this globalization. It is often seen that globalization gives a call for a world of diminished state sovereignty and state crisis, because when the borders have become porous, who is really sovereign in terms of rule making, in terms of decision making, therein lies the crisis. Today, modern globalization has changed the borders, the boundaries of frontiers, which has definitely led to the idea of redefinition in geography, reformation, or we can say of geography. This infers that territorial spaces does not bound or limit the social, the cultural, economic aspect of a particular place. What we said in the past, what is global now is connected to local, and vice versa, what is local definitely has a reach towards the global. And on the other hand, there is continuity of interchange and interconnections. So what we see that within these dimensions of globalization, there are multiple interpretations. Let me bring you here some of the ideas from the writings of various scholars which are thought-provoking. Professor David Held, a political science scholar, has analyzed globalization as, to say, process of widening, deepening, speeding up of worldwide interconnections in all aspects of contemporary social life. It challenges the nation state by its supranational force. It is driven by international trade and finance and facilitated by communication and technology, accompanied by what we can say deterritorialization because of space-time compression. It is a process, what Held says, of spatial organization of social relations and transactions, which can be seen in transnational or transcontinental or interregional networks and interactions. Further, though obituaries for globalization, or to say that globalization is in trouble because of every day some happening in other part of the world here or there, amidst these divergent responses, there is a need to make sense of intensification and accelerating pace of these ties. There are concerns of intellectual hegemony and normative values globalization brings. Another significant scholar that we all must know about, Susan Strange, a British scholar of international relations, who analyze that knowledge has become an important factor now in analysis of international political economy, and of course globalization is a part of that. Power does not shift between states and market, but that power determines the relationship between the state and markets. Corporations definitely have gone global. They have offices all over the globe, and new finance structure impacts power beyond the nation state borders. Susan Strange also adds that it was the delusion that the collapse of Soviet Union and that there is a definite decline in state authority with respect to markets in this post-Cold War era. To add here, sociologist Anthony Giddens, who in his writing opines that globalization involves complex interaction of the dialectics. Now, what are the dialectics here? Of the global and the local, which is expanding of disembedded mechanisms, price, social relations from, that is, the free it from the hold of specific locales, recombining them across with space, time, distances. What we find that globalization is viewed as a consequence of the distinct sociological theme of modernity. It is intensification of worldwide social relations, that local and global are related. It has then 4 dimensions, if according to that is according to Anthony Giddens. First, world capitalist system, that is the global economic activities. Second, nation state system, reflexivity of modernity and sovereignty. Third, world military order. And last, industrial development, that is division of globe as per division of labor of regional specificity. With new technological innovation, it spreads transnationalization. There are then of course risk of technological backwardness of those who are left out from this phenomena. With the rise of terrorist attacks, let me bring an example here, that is of 9/11. There was war on terror, where threats to security now cut across border, or by what we see that globalization in this stage, at the latest stage of exploitation, globalization has itself become more globalized with the way that it has had a transformative impact on our lives. An economist, very erudite, Martin Wolf, he brilliantly puts the idea, the debate forward, saying just that there can be only competing versions of democracy and not a perfect version. The same applies to globalization. Irrespective of all flip sides, globalization is here to stay. At one side of political, we may see that the world is witnessing shrinking of borders. To other that, there is debates whether sovereignty is still valid or no. At the economic side, we may say that the world is full of new kinds of organization, new kinds of trade relations. To other side, we may say that are these opportunities, the gap between rich and poor, still, why does this still exist? From the cultural side, we may say we are becoming much more homogeneous. We are much more cosmopolitan. To that, one may say that are we really united? Is diversity taking a backseat? At the technological side, we may see that we are witnessing new kinds of innovations every day. To that, there may be a debate that are these innovations readily available and accessible for the rich and the poor same? The debate goes on, but Martin Wolf says that globalization is just not an ideology, but a journey towards undefined destination, where in the process of greater integration, the factors that make it work, namely reduced costs, quicker communications, economic liberalization, they are always pervasive and irreversible. Market is the most appropriate instrument to raise living standards. The reasons as to what makes globalization work again has been pointed by Martin Wolf as the quest for better lives by individuals. Anti-globalism is often seen as anti-liberty. The solutions for dealing with issues of globalization comes from greater globalization itself. Now, when we look at instances like the September 9/11 terrorist attack, they stem from a mindset that they want to push the world back to ancient times. History teaches us that we have choices. So, if mankind is to choose for a better world, then it demands that states must understand their long run interests can be better met by cooperative global economic orders. An American political science scholar, which we all must know about, James Roseno, he holds that there are multiple ways in which individuals experience fragmentation that is prevalent in global times. To state here, skill revolution, which comes with information revolution, attenuation of traditional authority structures, to name here again the government, and the rise of new spheres of authority like non-governmental agencies. This phase is theorized as a period of turbulence with disturbances, because this is being caused by weakening of structures of long-standing authority, subgroups becoming important, simultaneous centralization and decentralization at play. Richard J. Pine, in his book Global Issues, says that globalization refers to shrinking distances amongst its continents, a wider geographical sense of vulnerability, a worldwide interconnectedness of important aspects of human life, including religion, migration, war, finance, trade, diseases, drugs, music.
Therefore, sorry to interrupt you, ma'am, over here. We have a caller from Rajasthan. So, let's take the question first. Hello? 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 Hello?
Hello?
The caller just has disconnected, I think so, and he just
hello?
want to, yes, hello? Yes, please tell your name and ask the question.
भारत पर ग्लोबलाइजेशन के क्या क्या प्रभाव हैं और उन पर डिफरेंट डायमेंशन से अगर हम देखें तो कैसा क्या प्रभाव अब तक पड़े हैं और उनके निहितार्थ क्या हैं, व्हाट आर द इम्प्लीकेशंस एंड व्हाट आर द इफेक्ट्स of globalization on India with respect to different dimensions.
Okay, fine. Thank you, dear friend, for asking question. This caller was from Rajasthan and he want to ask in context to India, what is the impact of globalization on this our country India, as well as he wants to know the implications of the different dimensions in context to India only.
Now, when we look at the case study of India, just like any country, globalization in India has led to a divided impact. By divided impact, I mean it has positive as well as negative. Now, to take some examples here, of course, in the realm of culture, there is this idea of rise of global culture, the rise of multinational corporations. But again, there is a debate that is India versus Bharat, rural versus urban. The areas where global forces have had better impact, they witness changes wherein there are huge amount of rural areas where process of globalization did not make an impact, and they're still at the back seat. So when we look at the case study of India, globalization definitely had a divided impact. It led to some positive, but it also had some negatives also. And the reform way out could be, that is what Joseph Stiglitz also says, let's make globalization work. That is, let's sequence and work out the pace of reforms in a manner which is much more democratic, which enhances participation, and which of course makes market and the state work together for the welfare of individual. Just to say that globalization has had negative impact also does not mean that we do away with all the benefits that globalization brings in. That is more technology. Today we are connected via new forms of communications. Today we are discussing about new kinds of horizons of market, new types of developments in democracy, governance. All this has been somewhere facilitated by globalization. But yes, there were some certain amount of areas which lagged behind, and the larger policy implication should be to get all arenas together for the welfare of nation. Saying no to globalization is definitely not the way out.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving answer to the caller. And dear friend, thank you for watching us as well as asking your question. So be connected with us and be a part of our every session. So ma'am, let's continue further from the point where you left.
So dear listeners, as we were debating on globalization and its dimension, one of the theorists and economists that you must often read, Joseph Stiglitz, who got the Nobel Prize also for his work, he held that what makes globalization problematical is that it lacks fair implementation. The neoliberal agenda was either applied in a hurry or without any due proper thought. Sequence and the pace of reform were done in haste, and alongside the presence of inadequate information, they have been responsible for several programs and adjustments that globalization often led to. Imposition of fiscal austerity, wrongly advocating capital account liberalization were often other mistakes. The idea of the term Washington Consensus turned out to be a conspiracy unleashed by the vested forces, that is people that, as Stiglitz says, namely IMF, World Bank and the United States. Now, the writings of these scholars who in their own way have tried to conceptualize globalization. What is significant for us to understand that there are numerous other issues which are related to globalization. As we pointed out, one such issue, that is distinction between globalization and globalism. In today's world, it is generally understood that globalization and globalism are same things. There is a tendency to take both terms in the same sense because of, you can say, phonetic similarity. However, both have their own different meaning and scope. They both are opposite phenomena. There is a need to make distinction between the both. While globalization is an integrative, assimilative process, globalism is an ideology which counters singularity, unilateral phenomena or entity. It focuses on multiplicity. So what we see here is that in globalization there is a quest for cheap labor, raw material, new markets, new movements, which is based on the assumption that it is a pursuit towards a better world. It has no impact on any social, ethical, moral and environmental aspect. It is the concept of letting the market work without any interferences. Whereas globalization is globalism, I add here, is sustainable only on the ethical and normative character that to survive together we need to have solidarity. So what we see here is that today globalization is having multiple interpretations. Within this multiple interpretations, we saw that there are positive dimensions, but alongside there are negative dimensions also. So when we look at the world, globalization is one of our defining criteria. Globalization somewhere can be seen as irreversible because of the choices it presents to us. Somewhere there are deep within our lives. Globalization may denote exchange and interdependence, but somewhere we have to see within this exchange and interdependence there are certain other concepts. The concept of Americanization too has been interlinked with the concept of globalization, but they are distinct. Because if I can quote Camille Bigot here for you all, the political science scholar, who says that globalization and Americanization need to be seen in a historical sense. Globalization definitely is can be seen to post 1984 world. I repeat, that is post 1948 world. Americanization dates back to the demise of Soviet bloc, but there is certain kind of similarity between Americanization and globalization that in everyday daily habit we have got it together. So dear friends, today we discuss globalization and its various dimensions, from political, social, cultural, technological to ecological. Globalization refers to a process of integration, exchange, interconnectedness. The world is shrinking, space and time are being compressed. There are positives as well as negative concepts. So therefore, to sum it up, just like any concept in the political discourse, globalization too is a contested concept. The journey continues, and therefore our discussion, our debates and interpretations on this topic will also continue. Thank you dear listeners for listening to us.
With this note, thank you and thank you so much for giving us such a wonderful lecture. Dear friends, you are requested to write to us at info.cec@nic.in if you have any question or if you wish to give your feedback for this particular lecture. Your questions will be answered in the forthcoming sessions when Dr. Amna Mirza visits our studio, and we would like to tell you all that if you wish to see this lecture one more time or number of times, then there is a wonderful opportunity for you, as we are going to upload this lecture on YouTube for you. So you can see this lecture the number of times you want it, and afterwards, yes, you can write to us at the same ID, that is info.cec@nic.in. We are taking your leave with the promise that we are going to meet again very soon and would be discussing on more such topic like these. With this note, we are saying goodbye to you, and thank you ma'am, thank you so much.